Welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast, the podcast for high-performing hearing care clinics that want to learn the strategies, ideas, and truths behind some of the smartest private practice clinics in the world. Now, time for your hosts, Phil M. Jones and Ollie Luke.
Hello. I promise you are all in the right space, the right place. I see some of you coming in to come and join us live. I will be kicking off the live interview with our author of the month for this month's book club very, very shortly. Let's just give it another 30 seconds or so, see who comes in live. And so that I can see that you're there and know that we're all talking together, is do me this favor in a second. Just say hi in the chat so we know that you are there. Aha, looks like we have you folks saying hello, which is a good thing. Oh, very nice, very nice. Even Oliver, I like Oliver using his full name. Okay, good to see that we've got a number of you here. I will get this show on the road. So hello and welcome to another edition of Book Club here with Orange and Grey. And today I am joined by a very, very, very special guest. We are joined by the brilliant Jantsch. And Jantsch has owned a business for almost 3 decades, observing and documenting the entrepreneurial experience through his own unique story. He's the best-selling author of Duct Tape Marketing, the Referral Engine, and more. His books have been translated into 10 languages, and his writing has appeared in Inc., Entrepreneur, and Southwestern magazine. You can find out more about John at ducttapemarketing.com, and I've been lucky enough to be able to learn more about John through a friendship through the years as we have been together on the speaking circuit. So John, welcome to the show. Good to be able to have you here, my friend.
I'll get everything turned on here in a second. My camera's not
Go.
cooperating. It keeps turning. It keeps turning itself off. Hang on. There we go.
John's proving just how it really is. Look at this. So John, welcome. Good to see you here.
Well, thanks, Phil. Great to be here.
Well, today we're going to be chatting a little bit about one of your works that is a more unusual of your works in relation to what you're typically known as. We are going to talk about the Self-Reliant Entrepreneur. Before we dive into that, though, more people will be aware or perhaps come across your work through pieces like Duct Tape Marketing, the associated podcast, and if they haven't, in some way they've probably touched your work through experiencing some of the SEO strategies that you wrote or were part of or privy to many of the moons back. Give us a rapid bio into the Duct Tape Marketing side of John.
Sure. And
how the Self-Reliant Entrepreneur came to.
Yeah, so I started my own marketing consulting practice, as you noted, 30 years ago or so. And, like a lot of people, I had no plan, no idea. I knew I could hustle work. So I went out there and I got big clients, I got little clients, I got big projects, little projects. And somewhere along the way, I landed a couple of small businesses as clients. And there was something about working with small business owners I just really loved, but they were also really frustrating. They had the same needs and challenges as much larger organizations, but certainly never the same budgets or really even attention spans half the time. And so at some point I decided that to solve my frustration and work with small business owners, I had to create a very systematic approach to marketing where I could walk in and say, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. Here are the results we hope to get. By the way, here's what it costs. It's a long-term, retainer engagement because marketing is a system. And what I discovered pretty quickly was that in trying to solve my great frustration, I tapped into what is still today, maybe increasingly, the greatest frustration for most small business owners. It's really hard and getting harder to buy marketing services because everybody's selling a piece of the puzzle. There are so many more pieces to the puzzle today. And so the fact that somebody would walk in and say, marketing is a system. It starts with strategy before tactics. We're gonna work on it in a very systematic way and install marketing as a system was kind of music to their ears. And so as I quickly discovered that was an approach that really resonated with small business owners, it kind of became my life's work. And I decided if I was going to create this, almost turn marketing into a product, I was going to have to give it a more product-ish name. And so that was really the genesis of the term duct tape marketing. That was kind of my term for this new approach to marketing. that idea, that term, that metaphor, that I was trying to get across with it, seemed to really hit people, immediately. They kind of got what I was after. So it turned into, from my system, my name, for almost like a product. I basically put it on the name of my company. It became my first book. It's my podcast. It's now a network of independent marketing consultants around the world that license the same idea. So kind of the seed of the idea of marketing as a system has grown to represent really the same point of view, but in many, many avenues.
And we get it. I mean, here at Orange and Gray, we spend the bulk of our time helping our clients build systems and to automate and to understand that there is method to madness, and it isn't all glitz and glam. There can be process right behind, lead acquisition, can be process behind getting found as opposed to them finding somebody else other than you, and process attached towards how you can nurture people into being customers. So we're singing from the same hymn sheet on that one, John. Now let's just perhaps shift gears a little. Is you come from this marketing background, is that you've helped build systems that have created fantastic results for your clients. You work with licensed partners around the world that deliver your systems. My guess is in all of that, not only have you had a wealth of experience as an entrepreneur yourself, you've also had this third-hand experience of being an entrepreneur through your clients and then your clients' clients and on and on and on. So am I right in saying that what you brought to the table in the Self-Reliant Entrepreneur is something that you felt was useful because of that wisdom and knowledge of all of those businesses?
You put it probably a little tidier than my thinking probably went. I mean, my thinking on it probably went that this is a book that I actually kind of wrote for myself in some ways.
Okay.
This idea, I think entrepreneurship is the greatest self-development program, ever created, if you allow it to be. And so, at some point in, owning my business, I realized I had to work on myself as much as I had to work on my business if I were going to survive, if I was going to continue to grow, frankly. And so I've done over the years, at least spanning a couple decades, a lot of things around this topic of self-development. I've, had a morning routine for years. I do a lot of things to kind of get myself ready to go out there every day. And so in a lot of ways, I wrote this book as kind of a supplement to my practice, if you will. It is, not a how-to book in any way, shape, or form. It is a why-to book, maybe. So it is greatly different than anything I'd written before. But in some ways, the kind of seed of it was that this is a book that I wish I had. I have worked with thousands, tens of thousands of business owners under the banner of marketing. But when you work with small business owners, I mean, marketing's everything. You get into their personal lives. You get into, marketing being a tool to actually allow them some freedom, or successful marketing, allow them some freedom in what they're trying to do. And so I think a lot of ways I've while I haven't, consistently just worked on mission and vision and things like that and self-development with my clients, it sort of just came with the job and became part of our toolkit.
Gotcha. So here we are. For those of you that haven't opened up your own copy of the book, or this is your first introduction to John's work and the Self-Reliant Entrepreneur, we have 366 meditations. And these are all things that you can read like in 90 seconds, and then you probably need a chunk of time to then do the thinking work that comes onwards from there. 2 questions for you, John, on this is firstly, why 366?
So this is a decidedly American thing. See, in America, we have leap year every 4 years.
Yeah. No, we have that in the UK as well.
I'm just kidding. I just had to tell you, that was my first shot there, Phil. I'm sorry I had to do that. But no, I have a brother that was born on March 1st. And I just remember that, it was always the joke was, if it had been a leap year or whatever, he'd only have a birthday once every 4 years. So I've just always been sort of keenly aware of leap year. And I thought, hey, this book is meant to be read for years to come, because, it just repeats itself, and you're not the same person you were January 1st, one year to the next. So it's a book that you can read for years. So I didn't want people to come to, February 29th one year and go, oh my gosh, there's no entry for me. And as it turned out, it was leap year the year this book came out. So I definitely needed it for that.
You thought you had to do it.
I had to do it.
That being said, why a book? And why not a calendar? Why not a planner, a journal, or any of the other things that this could? Why a physical book that was meant to sit on a shelf?
Sure. Well, I think for a lot of people, that particularly people that still, kind of treasure the analog experience, books are something that people will put on their night table or wherever it is that they kind of get into their writing, their reading. A journal certainly would be a legitimate off-spin. A calendar would certainly be, legitimate off-spins. But I think in terms of the collection in one place, it just felt like, a book was the right space, the right starting point. I'm an author. So for me, it just felt like the right package.
Okay. I was fortunate enough to receive my copy of this book before it was launched out to the wider world. And I remember opening it and starting at the beginning and feeling like I was in the wrong place. And then I remember, reaching to some of the days or trying to follow it in order. And then was wondering, I wonder how John wants me to use this book, because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed bouncing around in it. I also stumbled across a problem that if I didn't like the question the book was asking of me, I'd just pick a different one. So what's your take on that? How do you intend somebody to use a book? And what do you say to somebody that is perhaps not liking the thing that they're being asked to read on any given day?
So I probably wrote this, logically with, you jump in on today, whatever today is. You get the book today, jump into today and just, come back to it tomorrow, because that's just sort of a logical way to progress through a calendar kind of book. But what I quickly realized as people started consuming the book was that was my view, but there was certainly no right way to read the book. And I can't tell you all the different ways, or I'll share a few of them that I've heard from people. I have people that will sit down for an hour and read an hour's worth of things and then just kind of have a collective seed of ideas. I have people that say, I just what you said, I jump around in it. I just I like the randomness of the thought that I might come across, rather than saying I have to read this one tomorrow. Then there's certainly one of the things that the book does. There are 12 calendar months, and then I also borrowed the seasons, which was obviously a metaphor that was there for the taking. And so each month relates to a overarching theme. So it might be resiliency or trust or failure. And so I do have people that have told me that if they're feeling particularly non-resilient, or if they're feeling like they need a shot in, one of the particular topics, they'll jump to that month and kind of browse around in there. Now, as far as the questions go, you can't write 366 questions that everyone is going to say, oh boy, I needed that one today too. What I find that happens is a lot of times people go, that is something to think about. On half the questions. And then every now and then they'll just stumble across one that just goes, wow, that one kind of punched me in the gut. And I think that's sort of the game we're trying to play. I'm not trying to punch anybody in the gut, but it's everybody's going to have their own relationship to the questions and to the readings. And that's the ironic thing about writing a book about self-reliance, is there's no one that can tell you how to read this book, how to consume this book, or how to be self-reliant.
Okay. We do have some of our Inner Circle members here live with a front row seat listening to our conversation here today. So if any of you folks have questions that you want me to pose towards John, I'm following the chat, I'm following the Q&A here as we record this in Zoom. But John, we're going to get into the book in a second. Before I just pick a day at maybe random, what I wanted to be able to ask of you is why is it important to take these moments of time to reflect? Why is it important to have, quote unquote, a daily meditation of some description?
Well, all I can tell you is why it's important to me, and I'll emphasize that. Everybody has to make their own decisions about that, space, or that how they prepare or how they show up. But for me, I've always felt that being an entrepreneur, I love every minute of it. But I also can tell you that we put a lot of stress on ourselves. We go out there and we tend to have a tendency to. We're trying to build this thing. We're trying to grow this thing. We're trying to have it go a certain direction that we predetermined in our annual planning meeting. And there are all kinds of things that are going to show up to knock you off course. There are, things that are going to happen every day, every hour, an email that shows up, that are there. And I've come to believe their only goal is to test you, is to see if they can knock you off course. And so my personal belief is that if I establish a routine that gets me sort of in my highest mindset, that gets me thinking about what's important as opposed to other things I can't control, then I'm more prepared to kind of take those body blows. I'm being very probably cynical sounding about being an entrepreneur, but I think a lot of people can relate to the mental and physical aspects of running your own thing. Of a lot of times without any guidance, without any, having done it before, you're making a lot of decisions all day long. And I just think that in some ways fortifying yourself, putting yourself in the right space before you go out the door or wherever it is you go, has been a practice that's been very valuable to me.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think I'll add to that in terms of my own opinion on why I think it's important is that we all get tied up in busyness. And that's the downside of being an entrepreneur. There's always something to do. There's always something that needs your attention. There's always somewhere to be able to focus. If you're not hustling every moment of the day, if you're not working on your high payoff activities, you feel like you're cheating from yourself. And the discipline to be able to actually decide that some sort of form of self-reflection is a difficult muscle to flex, but one that I found every time I found the commitment to be able to keep going with it, that it's paid me back in dividends. And I can't quite justify the ROI on it, yet I still know with certainty that it was worth it. And I think what else I experience when you take those times is you have some of the conversations you've been meaning to have. You've been hoping to have with someone else. You've been wondering, who should I call? Who should I speak to? Who can help me with this? Yet when you give yourself these times to be able to reflect, what happens is you realize that you are the person you needed to have that conversation with.
Yeah.
You just hadn't had that time carved out to have conversation with yourself. And you avoid the self-sabotage of bringing the conversation you need to have to yourself to the wrong person.
Yeah.
Which can often, have some negative consequences in a family unit or in a relationship, etc. So diving into the book, and if anybody else wants to give us a different place to start, then do so in the chat. But I thought the natural place to start has got to be the day we're recording this interview, right? That has got to be the natural place to be able to start. And I'm going to read what you've decided to publish. So I'm not going to make you read it, but I am going to find this. And today we are March the 11th, correct?
Correct.
And what's interesting about March the 11th is his title is Crazy for Yourself. Which is pretty cool, right? Pretty cool that we're going to dive into a topic about being crazy for yourself. And you knew that, John, right? You knew that was March the 11th?
I did. And maybe set it up a little bit. The structure of the book, for those of you that haven't gotten into it, is every day starts with a title, as Phil just read, but then there is a reading from a very narrow band of literature that I curated from the mid-19th century, a period that some folks call the Transcendentalist period. It was the first kind of countercultural period in America when we were trying to abolish the human act of slavery. We were on the doorstep of the Civil War. Women were first starting to march in the streets to try to get the right to vote. So all of a sudden, you started seeing writing from people like Thoreau and Emerson that was very overt about, hey, we need to think for ourselves. We need to stand up and do your own thing. And even in some of the literature that we were asked to read, Moby Dick, Scarlet Letter, Little Women, it was the first time in American literature that the protagonist was very much, hey, this may cost me everything, but I've got to do what I've got to do. And I just think that's 150 years later, that's still some of the best advice for entrepreneurs. So that's why I chose that band of particular American literature. Then there's about 150 words of me kind of contextualizing on the reading itself. And then, as we've talked about at length, every day we end with a question. So I thought people needed that setup maybe to know what it was they were getting themselves into.
Well, I'm hopeful that many people have already seen it. If they haven't got it, they're already running out to Amazon to click buy now so that they can have this tool for their desk to prompt them. And I love going through it. I felt smarter just reading these pieces of prose. And some I had to read 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times to be like, I think I get it. Let me just read it one more time. I think I get it.
Especially the poetry. There are probably 10 or 15 stanzas of poetry in here, and the poetry is always the cheeriest for me.
Yeah, but you're right. It trains you to think. It's like a workout for the mind. And the first one for Crazy for Yourself that we'll jump to being as is today was Edgar Allan Poe. And you choose to be able to include, I am come of a race noted for vigor of fancy and ardor of passion. People have called me mad, but the question is not yet settled whether madness is or is not the loftiest intelligence, whether much of that is glorious, whether all of that is profound, does not spring from disease of thought, from moods of mind, exalted at the expense of the general intellect. How long did it take you to find that piece of prose?
Well, I can't really tell you exactly, that particular one. I'll tell you my whole process if you're curious, or you want to wait and keep this together on this. Okay. So my process, I first started just reading everything from this time. And then I was like, how am I going to collect all this? I was highlighting things and think, well, how am I going to? So that's when I came on the structure for the monthly theme. And so then the theme for March is freedom. And so then what that allowed me to do is go looking for what did Poe have to say about, X topic or all of, the 60 writers or so that I kind of collected. And so that allowed me to find things. And then, I would like to say that I outlined the entire book and then kind of said, well, here's what I want this day to say. But what I really did was I just found passages that moved me in a way and sort of made the theme around that passage for that day. So there was really no preconceived notion about what everything was going to happen in March, other than it was generally going to be around the topic of freedom. And so, today's generally related to freedom in that, we're giving ourselves the freedom to not care that other people may think what we're doing is sort of mad because they don't understand it.
Okay. And your words here that build off Poe's, which is, have you ever tried to explain to others what you do, not only to be greeted with the mild looks of confusion tinged with disapproval? Maybe it's that's interesting, which is a nice way of saying, is that even a thing? But as Poe suggests, entrepreneurs too come from a race noted for vigor of fancy and ardor of passion. Maybe your parents, your spouse, or your high school buddies don't understand, because maybe you don't fully understand enough to articulate it just yet. All you know is that you possess a deep sense that you must do what you set out to do. Is it madness to lurch out on your own, or is it more so to show up and collect salary in the service of someone else's dreams? Is it riskier to control your own destiny or to depend on the decisions of another to feed your soul? Yeah, you're probably a little mad in somebody's definition, but all that is glorious springs from some form of madness. Today, be crazy for yourself and no one else. And we'll get to the question in a minute. We have, listening into this, a number of leaders of hearing care practices. I don't know many people who are 2, 3, 4 years of age that say, when I grow up, what I'd like to be is an audiologist, let alone run a hearing care business, let alone understand the marketings of get people who are suffering with something they don't want to own up to be able to reach out for help, to get help to pay for something that they don't wish to own, that is at a price significantly higher than anyone would wish to pay for it. I don't know anybody that set out to be able to go and do that. Yet here we are, and we have 18 of them live with us at this very moment in time, crazy enough to say, you know what? I am going to start a hearing care business. I'm going to build and grow a hearing care business. I'm going to look after the people in my community or communities that are finding it difficult to hear. And I'm going to do it with grace. I'm going to do it with vigor. And I'm going to do it for the distance. And my guess is that there are a number of other people that have said things that are kind of contrary to that perhaps stand in the way of your momentum. Tell me in the chat, just for any of you that are here right now, that when you told somebody you were going to study to be an audiologist, or when you said you were going to open your own business, what are some of the things that have been said to you along the way? And while I'm looking in the chat for those to come in from you, John, you and I speak for a living, right? Quite often we get classed as speaker or author. Where have you found some friction when you've tried to explain to somebody what you're working on or what you're doing?
Well, that some of the words in this probably sprang from the fact that, for at least a good 20 years, I don't think anybody in my immediate family understood what I did, because it just wasn't, it wasn't a marketing consultant. What does that mean? And like, why are people reading your books? Why would anybody buy a book that, I've seen you on a Tuesday, after, playing basketball and drinking beers. I mean, how could you possibly like help anybody out? So, and I think most of us probably have experienced something along those lines. And a lot of times it starts with family. The people that love us the most, right? And want to see us thrive, wish we could have been something else, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs, struggle, even if they can articulate. I suspect some of the folks on this call, have a pretty good definition of what it is they do for a living, right. That, can be well understood by somebody. But as you alluded to, why that, and then take it a step further. Why are you passionate about that? Okay, great. Maybe there's a lot of money in that, but you seem to actually be passionate about it. Yeah. And that's the part that I think is really tough for a lot of people, especially when they see it from you and they sense it from you. It's like, why are you jazzed about this? And I think that's kind of what I was tapping into in today.
Yeah, and I think you get it spot on. You make me think. And the question that you then raise at the end is so key, and we'll get to that because I know some people aren't looking at the book like I am. But what I do want to say is it's interesting what people have put back here in the chat. Right, Nancy says they think I said cardiologist, right? You say I'm an audiologist, and 2/3 of the world thinks you said cardiologist, and then they've memory pegged you that says if I'm suffering from heart disease, are you going to tell me to put down that piece of steak, right? Like that's what people think of you when you say audiologist, because they don't know, which is what Jane gets here, which is like, what's that? Or why? Why would you choose to do that? Or then you get Julie here that says, oh, if I was young and agile, I'd go dig around in those ruins too. Which means that people didn't hear audiologists as they heard archaeologists, right? Like that's what people are dealing with. And then you've got your challenge question here, John, which I think with all this setup, if you give yourself the gift of thinking this through and probing yourself without getting straight to the question, that's where the magic happens. Yeah. Because the question you ask here is, have you ever tempered your passion for something for fear others won't get it? See, where your brain naturally goes with this piece of prose and then your articulation of it is it's other people's fault, right? Is they just don't get it. They don't understand. If they were smarter, then they'd be able to support it better. My family don't support my dreams the way I am. It's like life is harder for me because I'm special, woe's me, right? Like that is the natural human instinct to go to. Yet your question here says, have you ever tempered your passion for something for fear others won't get it? You leave 2 lines in the book to complete for a question that requires a 3-letter answer or a 2-letter answer. And I think we all know that we're going to reach for the 3-letter answer, right? Is yes, we have, which then opens up another 3-letter question, which is why. Yeah. And you take yourself down this beautifully gifted rabbit hole of saying, hold on, am I not being where I would like to be right now because of the fact that I've been shy? Or because of the fact that what I haven't done is I haven't done a good enough job of sharing why I'm passionate about something. It's because for fear of being seen as mad, then what I've chose to be able to do is to be normal or complacent, even though I picked a path that without question was free from normality. So did you intend that people to have that same crazy-ish thought process that I've just gone through on that one piece there? Is that your intention in setting the book up the way that you have?
Well, again, I'm with the risk of sounding like a broken record here. I can only tell you that, how, where that sprang from me. But I suspect it is a universal feeling as you've just described. So the first question becomes, is there something that you're not sure about? Are you not able to own, what it is that you do or articulate what you do because you are maybe a little afraid that people are going to think less of you because of it? It's not even about they don't understand it. It's like, oh, you couldn't be a real doctor. Sorry, I'm guessing that probably happened. I know that I had written maybe 3 books by the time I was finally able to tell somebody I was an author. I think a lot of us, kind of go through that kind of, they won't understand. They won't think it's enough. They'll think I'm a fake, and I think that we rob ourselves of some of the joy in what it is that we do by putting that mask on.
You're right. I think sometimes you have to hear that you're something successful from enough people to perhaps start thinking about it yourself. And this industry here, John, is really interesting because still many people would describe themselves as audiologists or hearing care practitioners. They would describe themselves by their skill set, their credentials, their academic ability to be able to do something. Yet every single person in this group, and I'm pretty sure that every single person that is listening to this interview, has never once described themselves as an entrepreneur. Now, validate that for me in the chat, those that are listening live. But John, what's your thought on that? What is your thought on the fact that people that step into a world of with a high level skill set of the job that they do, that then find themselves running that as a business and have adopted this ability of being an entrepreneur? Yeah. What do you say to somebody that falls into that category?
So my good friend Michael Gerber, who wrote the E-Myth, used the term, and he was good enough to write the foreword to my first book, used the term that those are technicians that occasionally suffer from an entrepreneurial seizure. Is how he described it. And that's really not just, obviously highly trained professionals are more technicians than other folks in some ways, because they were told to be technicians. And so, a lot of times an entrepreneur is only thought to be purely somebody who has this idea that didn't exist before, created this thing that didn't exist before, built it to a certain level, got lots of users or clients, and sold it off to Google or, whoever. But I think you're right. Increasingly, if we don't think of ourselves as entrepreneurs, then we will be consumed in the work, and the work is, and the impact that we have through our work is really only half of it. The real value, I think, of doing any work, of having any business, of having the impact that we're able to have, whether it's on leaving the business to a family member or just the thousands of patients that you treat, is the joy that it actually can produce for you and your life. And I think if we don't balance those things, then we really are going to stay in that technician mode.
Got it. Nancy's just commented something here in the chat, John, where she says, my mother asked why I would want to go into a business selling hearing aids. Yeah. She can believe any child of hers would be dishonest enough to be in sales.
Well, we got a lot to unpack there.
So I'm going to just leave that there and let you think that way you choose for this one.
Well, I think she's revealing, something that is, it's a very common, parent dynamic that, many people experience. It's not ever brought out of thinking less. It's out of wanting more, from whatever it is they think more is. But then the other sort of misperception around sales, it's certainly much more than that, but to reduce it to that and then think that there's something wrong with that. Obviously, selling something or creating an environment where somebody can get something fixed, can get value, is a noble practice. If what you do, of course, is stealing people's money, and there are examples of certainly that, then yeah, that's not the good side of that. But I think that I think a lot of people carry that baggage around, and some of working on yourself is unpack those bags, and
you get clear on what it means to you to do what you do. And I think if you're centered in that, and questions like this allow you to kind of find that. And I think I'll just comment on that specific thing that Nancy's mentioned there too. And in my world, I'm often looking to be able to support people that don't want to see themselves as salespeople, right, yet still need to achieve sales results. And they fight that piece of friction. And you also know that words are my thing. So the simplest way I try to be able to get people to see around this is there's a big difference between influence and manipulation. Giant difference. And the difference between those two things is integrity. And providing you can act within integrity, then you can be free to influence. If you're acting without integrity, then what you're manipulating, and you're doing that for your own benefit. And I don't know anybody I've ever met in this industry, or certainly not to any great degree, that would fall on that line of manipulation.
Yeah.
They're there to pick up the pieces. And when it comes to picking up the pieces, there's something this book prompted me to think. Like, everybody's entrepreneurial. I think this book can help people become more entrepreneurial in the way in which they think. Erica Shakespeare writes in the chat that I've never thought of myself as an entrepreneur up until I purchased my practice. But I'm realizing that I have been one all along in my program development, that I have focused on all along previously for others' financial gain rather than myself. So the entrepreneurial vision was there. It's just they didn't realize that it was for somebody else's profit rather than their own. Pushing that one stage further and saying, what can we learn from other entrepreneurs, is how do we adjust one's process that we've seen work well here, and then say, how do we learn from it? And I love the way this book is set up. There's a challenge that most people in this industry face, is that they're being seen as the same as everybody else in their industry.
Sure.
And what's ending up happening, that we do a ton of work to try and fight against, is that the widget is becoming commoditized, and the person who sells the widget for the cheapest or the fastest is the person who wins the race. And the reality for the majority of patients is they need the provider's help, support to take them along an emotional journey. They understand that the treatment of hearing loss is like a coaching exercise. There's consultation that's required over a period. There's some hand holding. Also, from the patient's point of view, they're remarkably lonely. They've got nobody to talk to. They don't know where to turn. They don't understand what questions they need to ask themselves. They don't know whether they're doing well, whether they're doing badly. There's no scorecard. There's no way to be able to judge them. Yet what this book does, it allows you to have meaningful conversations with yourself, which allow you to be able to feel better or worse about yourself, but certainly take full responsibility about where you're at. And I'm wondering if the process of providing a piece of information and then asking a meaningful question at the end of that information could be useful when adapting it to a post-patient experience to help them understand the value they're getting from you over 60 days, 90 days, 360 days, right, past their initial point. What is your thought on that, John, as a marketer, aligning the process that you've done to the reader in this to using automation, for example, to assist patient care?
I mean, I think questions are always one of the most powerful instruments out there. I mean, we could go as far back as the Socratic method, which, of course, can drive some people crazy with the level of questioning. But I think that idea of getting, first off, questioning forces you to listen. So it certainly is a skill that's going to allow you to not make assumptions, hopefully. But I think it also, what I've experienced is the right set of questions can get somebody to answer the question themselves, for where they're headed or what they need or what's holding them back. And sometimes I know that I've heard from a lot of people that some of these questions just make them think about something they had never pondered.
Right.
And that unlocked something because they're like, oh, well, maybe that's it. Because a lot of times problems or issues or frustrations or stress, we can't articulate what's causing it quite often, but it's just like this thing. It's like this thing that's on our shoulders. There's a great line that I always blow from the Scarlet Letter that's in this book somewhere, that the main character in there, had the stress that she was living over got lifted. The secret was out, and she claimed that I had not known the weight until I felt its relief. And I think that that's true of so many people. They don't realize what they're living under from a stress standpoint until they get some relief. And I'll take it straight to your hearing impaired folks, that I'm sure that in many cases they don't realize what they're not hearing until they get the relief. And I think that the line of the questioning, I think a lot of times helps people unlock that.
Yeah. And I think in this industry, just taking from my experience in it often isn't relief that they feel in the first instance, it's confusion.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Right. Is what happens first.
Because their world just changed.
Well, they then think that these things are too loud or.
Yeah, right.
I can't think straight, etc.
Yeah, why are you shouting?
Right? For a period of time to filter through their impairment, and now all of a sudden they're receiving assistance or aiding for this, and they're like freaked out.
Yeah.
So the importance of questioning somebody, allowing them to go on a journey of self-discovery, I think we can bring into marketing. I think we can bring into customer experience. You apply it to, what Joey Coleman teaches, who people here have had the chance to listen to, and think about those phases that people go through in Never Lose a Customer Again, is you can start to think about how you can use these more thought-provoking questions to trigger a response in your patients that helps them feel like even your email sequence or your documented information that lands on their lap next is part of the consultation itself.
I know, every client that we've consulted with, I shouldn't say every, once I got good at this, every client that we consult with, there's a series of hard questions that if you don't ask them, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. Right. What are we trying to accomplish? How will we measure it? What value will that bring once we achieve that result? I mean, things like that are questions a lot of people in a selling environment don't want to ask because they're afraid what the answers might be. But every time I haven't asked those types of hard questions, I've generally had a less than desirable result in the engagement.
We're going to dive back into the book. And I want somebody here to prove that we can do this without landing on the obvious date of today's date. I'm looking for somebody else to give us a date to play with, whether it's your birthday, whether it's your favorite date, whether it is, just something you're looking forward to, whether it's a key moment that happened in your life. Give me a date to play with, and we're seeing what we can learn from John's thought-provoking approach that comes up in the Self-Reliant Entrepreneur. And, oh man, we got too many. I knew that would happen.
Everybody wants their birthday.
Yeah.
I did a lot of podcast interviews, and that was a very, very favorite for the host to ask for.
Well, at least I'm getting other people's birthdays than mine. But if we were to actually put a label on yourself, John, today, I think October the 14th is a great place to start, where we are titled Creative Genius.
October 14th came up, huh?
Yeah.
All right. So the theme of October is change. We've certainly seen a lot of that the last year, haven't we?
John, I'm going to give you the gift of reading what Margaret Fuller had to say, and then I'm going to unpack what you said after the fact.
Okay. So one of the things that I really enjoyed in my research in this is that I uncovered a lot of female authors who were not that well known to me. I think if you took a feminist studies course in college, maybe they're more familiar to you. But a lot of women authors their works didn't see the light of day in that period. Really, really some amazing stuff. Margaret Fuller is probably one of the more well-known, feminist authors, but she was way ahead of her time in that period of the mid 1900s or 1800s. Creative genius. I've come prepared to see all this, to dislike it, but not with stupid narrowness to distrust or defame. On the contrary, while I will not be so obliging as to confound ugliness with beauty, discord with harmony, and laud and be contented with all I meet when it conflicts with my best desires and taste. I trust reverent faith to woo the mighty meaning of the scene, perhaps to foresee the law by which a new order, a new poetry is to be evoked from the chaos. Margaret Fuller, at home and abroad. Now, should I give you the context of what she was looking at when she wrote that?
Yes, please, or I'll read what you write.
So she was, I can't remember if I said this in there. No, I didn't say that. So she was looking at Niagara Falls for the first time.
Wow. And that's where she was coming from then. She was coming from describing or the position of looking at Niagara, and having stood there and looked at it myself a few times, like now makes a lot more sense.
Where I was coming from, of course, as you'll unpack a little bit, is the idea of judgment that sometimes comes with us, judging our genius as not so much.
Okay. Well, you write this here. Creative genius is often seen as something that comes to the chosen few who pick up a brush or sit at a piano and craft something so original that duplication is unthinkable. That's the storybook version anyway. The reality is likely closer to something like this. You search high and low for something you want. But when you can't find it, you decide to make it. You wrestle with a creative way to package your offerings, and then one day, while reading a work of fiction you brought to the beach, you stumble on the perfect solution in some quirky piece of dialogue between characters. A client asks you why you've always done something a certain way, and you can't find a meaningful answer, so you build a new way. That's creative genius. That's the law in which a new order, a new poetry is to be evoked from this chaos. Question everything, tear apart best practices, create unusual pairings, take nothing but a notebook with you on vacation. Creative genius is found in paying attention for what the universe is showing you in all those places you don't go looking for. Love. And then you ask a question, which I have to jump straight to, because this is crazy. Which color describes you best and why? So those listening, answer that question for us in the chat. Which color describes you best or best defines you and why? And John, please tell us why that question is important.
So I don't know if it's important or not, but what I was attempting to do was just what happened to you, cause a little bit of creative shock. It's like, what? But we all often associate being warm and things being hot, related to color. And so, frankly, I just I wanted to force people to do a creative exercise, but something that kind of made them step back and go, huh? Mm-hmm. So apparently, I accomplished my goal there.
Yeah, you did. And this is the most engagement we've had in the chat from Inner Circle members. They're like, what? It's funny, I do something similar now with my speeches, that when we are doing virtual sessions and for me to get engagement, everybody says, give us the name of the city that you're in, yada, yada, right. 1,000 times. I say, I'm going to ask you a really important question that you listen with your fingers in this environment. Please, can you tell me your favorite vegetable? Right? And instantly, it's not what people are thinking. And the same thing happens here, which is exactly what just happened to me. And this thought about creative genius is so hard, right? Because you have to work through the creative process, yet also never call yourself a creative genius.
Right.
Because that would suggest that you figured it out. That would suggest that you've got the ability to keep doing this, the ability to be able to create the next best version after you've already done it once. And what do you think to that thought process around, okay, you've pushed the envelope once, you've created something that's innovative or pioneering, and now that expectation lands on you to keep being able to do so. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think that first off, I use the term, best practices, rethink best practices. That's one term I've always hated, because it suggests that it can't get any better. Mm-hmm. And so I think we should first off, always be looking for better practices. And to me, the tool, I think you have to keep growing. If you're not growing, somebody's running by you, or the industry is changing around you. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years. We didn't have the internet when I started marketing. Had I not grown a little bit, I'd still be selling billboards to somebody, or yellow pages to somebody. But that mentality that I have to keep growing, is a creative process itself. And it is, in my opinion, it requires a high level of curiosity. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that if you don't have it, some people are more innately blessed with the curiosity gene than others. But if you don't feel like you have that, that's something that I think you have to work on. You have to develop, because it to me is how you grow. I mean, you can go to a conference, you can come to these calls and learn things, but ultimately, to craft something that is uniquely yours, you have to discover it by experiencing things. And I think that's part of the entrepreneurial process, is that I'm not saying you can't stand still for fear that, the competition will catch you, because that adds its own level of psychosis. But it's really more about you have to continue to grow on behalf of your customers, and maybe even grow with your customers.
Right. And much of this creativity comes from doing things like reading books, attending sessions like this, going to conferences. Yet what you've done there is to help bridge the gap for many. Because I think what people think they should leave with is a list of actions.
Yeah.
Yet what they really should leave with is a list of questions that they're prepared to do the work on to help understand, how do I use this? Yeah. How do I actually take this the final distance to be able to make it fit for me? How do I tailor that idea so that I can execute it? It's not idea to execution. It's idea, personalization, and then execution. And the personalization part is what requires the creative genius.
Yeah, and my favorite thing to do, quite frankly, is certainly I've read my share of marketing books, but I don't go looking for ideas in marketing books necessarily. My favorite thing to do is to get ideas from books completely unrelated. If you could see books that are back behind me here, I have books on wolves, on architecture, on calculus, and it is the structure of a wolf pack is one of the most amazing idea generators for things like marketing, for things like community, for things like innovating your service practices. And I always find if I go there with that point of view in mind, I'm looking for innovations in X. I can read anything and will get way better ideas.
I think you're so right. And that's what I love about the efficiency of this book. Because what it does is it means I don't need to go through tons of Edgar Allan Poe prose for me to be able to find something that sparks my thinking. I can reach into John's curation of some thought-provoking pieces of content that come from outside of the typical norm. I can take your almost commentary of what I'm supposed to think because of what has just been laid down, and then I can take your question. I can mash those little things up together and create my own unique cocktail from those ingredients that may or may not serve me, may or may not taste great, but I get to play in my mind through the boundaries that you've created. And that is fun.
I'll tell you one practice that I thought was really cool that I've heard from a number of people is that they'll read this in the morning. They'll have the question, and today's question was maybe a little easier to answer with a succinct answer, but then they'd take it into the entire day and then start saying, okay, I saw a couple of yellows there as they were flashing out. If I'm yellow, what does that mean? Because let's face it, colors have meaning. Colors have emotions. And so if you're identifying with the color, you're probably identifying with some of those traits of the color. And so if you put that in there, then you take that into the day and you start witnessing how it shows up. You start witnessing the good and the bad of it. And at the end of the day, maybe you're more prepared to wrestle with the question. Again, having paid attention. Because a lot of times, we go through a day. I don't know if you've ever done this, Phil. You get home at the end of the day and, somebody asks you, how was your day? And you're like, well, I don't know. I sure was busy though. So it's kind of neat to take something that forces you to be a little bit mindful of an idea.
Yeah, and even thinking from a marketing point of view, and a big reason that people consult our services at Orange and Grey is because we bring this level of creative thinking. We bring this looking at things from an altogether different angle. And we think about problems that they may well face ahead of them, or we provide creative solutions around those problems. And I think it's okay as an entrepreneur to understand the problem you're trying to solve as opposed to think you need the answer. And that's what you should look to bring to other people to fuel creativity, right? Is I'm struggling to be able to find alternative ways to achieve blank, or I feel certain there must be a better way that we can do Z, right? This is the kind of thinking that forces creativity as opposed to what's the best practice for this? Yeah, right. How should I? Yeah. Why should I be doing it? It's this ability to be able to operate in the play space where the magic happens and stay.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners spend a lot of time looking for the template. Yeah. And that's, there may be some things that you can learn from other people's, but that was their journey. That was what worked for them. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you. It doesn't mean it's the right thing, for you. It doesn't mean you're going to attract the client that you want to attract because you're, not being you.
That color thing is interesting as well. If you're brave enough to be able to carry it with you for the day, like you just suggested, right? My favorite color is orange. I'm wondering if that's why I picked you to be part of the show. If you look around my environment, I'm surrounded by things that are orange, and it's ended up being a purposeful part of brand story. It's ended up being a purposeful part of how I communicate with others. It's even ended up finding itself into the name of our agency with Orange and Grey, right? There is a through line through it. I see people like Jane saying that yellow is my favorite color, sunshine and bright outlook. What I'd throw back is if you could answer the question of what your favorite color was and why, How much does that show up in your world? If it brings you joy, if it is truly your favorite, does it ring through your brand colors? Does it show up in your workspace environment in order to be able to add creativity to? Is it something you can tie towards that creative genius piece that John's book has laid down here and say, well, actually, every time I see something yellow, I'm going to build myself a new rule to say, how can I re-look at a part of my process in my business to see if there's a way that I think that I can change it. It's how do you be able to tie those things together to force you to be able to adopt many of the habits you know that are going to make you a better entrepreneur. I like riffing on this with you, John. We should probably do one more day.
Okay.
Do I let you choose? Do I let the audience choose? Do I go the default option of picking my birthday like every podcast you go on? Now that seems like the non-creative genius way to be able to go. So we're going to find another way of going able to do this. So what I'm going to do is the third date that comes into chat is the one that we're going to pick, which means I need at least 3 of you to be able to put a date in the chat. Go for that for me right now. And that's the date that we're going to pick.
There's the sacrificial soul that put in first, right?
It is not yours. It means that it's Oliver's, which is February the 28th. Ollie is going to tell us why he went for February the 28th. And John's like, I love February the 28th.
I love February 28th.
I love February the 28th. John, tell us all about February the 28th. Hit us from the top on this one when you find it.
So this one is about creativity this month. February is all about creativity. I happen, people can't see it. I don't know if I showed my camera, it would help or not. If I move my camera, this is probably really bad TV. But if you look out my back window there, you'll see lodgepole pines and lots of snow and the fact that I'm at about 9,000 feet in the mountains. And so nature is a huge part of the creative process for me. It's a huge part of the spiritual process for me. And so this one is about a practice actually that I absolutely love, and it involves nature, but it doesn't have to for you.
And it's titled Your Sitting Place.
Yep.
John, would you do us the honor of reading what Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote?
You bet. The green trees whispered low and mild. It was a sound of joy. They were my playmates when a child, and rocked me in their arms so wild. Still they looked at me and smiled, as if I were a boy, and ever whispered mild and low, come be a child once more. So that's from Wadsworth's collected works of poetry.
I love that final line.
Yeah. And I think most people can experience that. I'm a little over the top probably, but if I've spent the day inside, I can go outside and sit under a tree or lean against a tree, and I immediately feel nature's energy.
Yeah, I'm the same. Is the ability to just get out, go for a walk, hear the rustle of the leaves, catch some fresh air. It completely changes my state. John writes here, there's a kind of weird thing about being an entrepreneur. Once you're immersed in a business venture, you lose the ability to see many things that are happening all around you and in your daily interactions with others. You're so deep in the business that you're no longer able to see the path of the business. It is much as if you were to hike through a wilderness. Many things could be going on all around you that would escape your notice as you push through. Predators, highly attuned to their survival desire, would hide or run without making a sound. Trees would whisper mild and low, and the songs of what seemed like 1,000 little birds would go unheard. That's just how it is. We're so determined to get to the summit or waterfall that we no longer see the miracles all along the path before us. Outdoor guides and even hunters will tell you the best way to capture nature is to sit and observe from the same spot day after day. Do this and the patterns and happenings of the entire territory, not just the map, will openly reveal themselves. Perhaps you did this as a child and have simply forgotten. Find your sitting spot and visit it often. Wilderness is optional, but it just might be the best option. Either way, develop the habit of silent sitting observation as a way to remain outside of your business. You know, see the forest and the trees. You may have seen that coming. And the challenge question here right now is, where can you go find your sitting spot? See, I don't have this right now. I don't have a sitting spot. I have sitting spots. But I think that what I've missed and could be remarkably helpful to me right now is is that repetitiveness. It's to see the changing of the same. It's the fact to understand and find tolerance to the fact that the world is never standing still, regardless of whether you are or not.
Yeah.
And ironically, there's been times in the past where I've been able to do that in the center of Manhattan. Yet your decision to be able to take it towards wilderness, I can see equally appealing. And the fact that I, up until my change around in the pandemic, had Manhattan as one life and the Buckinghamshire countryside as the other life, got the chance to be able to sit in both. But the chaos that exists through this last period of time has probably had a negative impact on that. So thinking out loud with you, John, how important is it in your mind to have a regular sitting space, having something that has some form of almost mundaneness to it, some form of sanctuary to it?
So it's important to me, but it's because it has sort of a trigger for me to kind of take me to the right mindset almost immediately. And so, because I'm there to work, even though I'm not working, I'm there to do a job, even if it's just to be completely mindful. And so it takes a little bit of snapping you into that place, or at least that's the impact it has for me. I think it's really more about a point of view, stop moving, and start witnessing. That obviously can be done, frankly, anywhere. I sometimes will stop in the middle of the day just to listen. Because we're just doing all the stuff that's going on around us. And if you ever stop and just close your eyes, take a couple of breaths and take your hearing outside, take your hearing to, all of a sudden it's like, wow, all this stuff is going on. I can't imagine Manhattan. You probably become a coarse Manhattaner and you can't even hear the sirens and the taxis anymore, but then if you choose to send the radar, out, all of a sudden it's like, wow, there's this beautiful, vibrant, stuff going on all around us. So I think it's really more of a point of view than a physical place. A physical place helps me get to that point of view faster.
Yeah. And I think a physical place can help other people understand too.
Yeah.
And as a busy entrepreneur, if you're running a life that has you multifaceted and you need these little thinking caves to plug into on occasion to just catch your breath, if you haven't communicated with others that that's what that place is for you, then expect interruptions whilst you're in that place.
Right.
So if you're running a busy office and you've got your team coming, etc., just because the chair is comfortable doesn't mean that should be your sitting spot. Like finding something that has some discipline attached to it could be useful. And there's a phrase that I developed in my business that I found helpful that was a polite way of saying to somebody, shut up, leave me alone, and come back to me in 30, 40 minutes because I'm in the middle of something, right? Is I learned the phrase, I'm playing golf. And all it meant is if you interrupt me when I'm mid-swing, I've got no chance of being able to come back and connect with the ball, none whatsoever. And that's what it was communicated to as team. But I think a physical place can do that better than even a way of succinctly telling somebody to leave you alone, right? Is having a place. And I think I'm going to take from even just that one example there, some more diligent discipline to choosing a couple of places that are sacred for that purpose and that purpose alone. I think just reading that again today, and you'll note what I've done is I've took the dust jacket off my book, because I think this book should be without dust jacket, because it's that kind of thought provoking. This belongs with many of the other authors that you've chosen to borrow words from as an entrepreneur's guide to thinking smarter through the thought provoking content that was presented to us from the past. And this is a hack. That's how I would describe this book. This is a hack at being more thoughtful, more self-reliant, having better conversations with yourself. And I've tried to demonstrate during this interview how just by taking 3 of the dates and jamming it out with the author a little about where it might take you, what it might lead to, how it keeps you in a continuous growth mode. And if over the last hour, you listening to this right now have perhaps grown in any way, shape or form, have triggered a thought that's allowed you to be able to consider new actions to change the way that you might do things, then this book is incredibly valuable. I think what could happen is if you follow some of John's advice and pick it up once a day and be brave enough to do the work to be able to get through it. That would be my encouragement to anybody listening into this right now. John, what words would you add to that to anybody listening in as to how they can best use the book moving forward?
Yeah, I often refer to it as a practice, and that's you've kind of hit on that. But I think a lot of times people have a practice of drinking water, of doing yoga. It's kind of the same thing. It's a cumulative effect. You're not going to get some bolt of insight. I don't think. Maybe the day you choose to start reading it will be the day you needed to read. But think of it as a practice. I mean, the time that you put in is 2 minutes to 5 minutes, maybe, especially if you're a journaler. Maybe you take the question and use that as your journal prompt for the day. So there's a lot of ways to use it, but just think of it as a practice. I have people, because the book's been out now for over a year, I have any number of people that said that they're amazed going through it a second time, that it's totally different for them the second time around. And I don't know about you, Phil, I've done this. I have books I've read 10, 12 times. And I'm always amazed at, like, no matter how much I've highlighted that book, I always find some nugget that I didn't see last time. And I think it speaks to the fact that if we continue this journey of growing, we will be a different person. We have no choice. We will be a different, more evolved person a year from now than we are today. And I think that's a way to look at it. Is it's just part of the journey.
John, thank you for joining us here today.
My pleasure. It's fun.
It's been a joy. I value your insights. I really value you taking the time to be able to put so much into a book that for many would be seen as to the left or to the right of where your core expertise would lie, due to your huge gravitas from Duct Tape Marketing. But thank you for showing up today with some vulnerability, giving us the ability to be able to play with your work and showing us just how much of a useful tool that it could really be. If people do want to find out more about you, they want to understand more about how you might be able to help them, or more about how they might be able to get more from this particular book, where should they go? How do they find out more about it?
Well, pretty much everything I've been working on the last few decades is at ducttapemarketing.com. That's just DUCTTAPE marketing.com. And I love hearing from people. I know a lot of the folks on here today have been gifted a book by you, Phil, and I love hearing from folks how this book impacted them, or any questions you have. So feel free to reach out anytime. It's just John at ducttapemarketing.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions and insights as you practice this book a bit.
John, you are a brilliant man. Thank you once again. Thank you on behalf of everybody who was here live listening in today. And if you're catching this on playback, thank you for your attention going through the journey on this. Looking forward to learning how the Self-Reliant Entrepreneur enables you to be a more self-reliant entrepreneur. Until next time, I've been Phil Jones. Look forward to catching up with you again on this month's book club with Orange and Grey. Thank you.
And there we have it. That is a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Hearing podcast. Make sure you subscribe to be the first to know when a new episode goes live. If you're feeling kind enough to share your experience and leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. And if you want to learn more, then go to www.orange-grey.com for article, guides and trainings specifically written for high-performing hearing care businesses. We look forward to speaking to you again soon.